Now we come on to hearing. You're going to hear tonight ancient Greek, 2,000 years old, pronounced in what I regard as the two best ways. That is to say, in the modern way, which has been more or less the same for 2,000 years, and in the reconstructed form, the reimagined form of the ancient language, as recommended by Professor Sidney Allen, whose pupil I was as a research student, and by Professor Geoffrey Horrocks, who succeeded him, who is a friend and a fellow of St. John's. So what we're trying to do is to imitate the Allen's-Horrocks take on the pronunciation of classical Greek. In either case, you shouldn't be able to hear much difference. In either case, whatever the speaker is currently using, it should sound like a real language, and it shouldn't be much more different to your ears than the difference between Scots and Southern English, for example. That's what I aim for. We now come to the voice. The narrative voice really in the book is obviously St. John himself, and he will be taken principally and throughout by Christos Tsiroyannis. But in order to give variety to you and to give rest to him, I've given variety by introducing, I've paired readers alongside him. The conceit underlying this is that you are to think of these pairs standing beside him as the two eyes with which he sees the visions, the two ears with which he hears the voices, and the two arms with which he embraces the subject matter. So that's why there'll be up to 7 speakers, but always Christos is the main narrator. Almost all these images were drawn by people who believed that the author of this book was St. John the Evangelist, and that his revelations had been inspired by God. And hence, almost all these illustrations are medieval when people took apocalypse seriously. Now, I've used variety, but I've tried to give unity throughout each of the 7 sections of the play. You'll find within the section you have a unified source of the imagery, and I hope you'll enjoy that. The first 3 sources you meet are all medieval. So in the prologue, and then again in Act 5 in the epilogue, it's based on a very, very famous manuscript in Trinity College Library, Gothic, sort of middle of the 13th century. Act 1, the one with the seals and the 4 horsemen, comes from another French manuscript, another Gothic manuscript in Paris. But Acts 2 and 3, I think my favourite imagery, the trumpets and the 7 vials, come from Spain, and they're much earlier. They're before the year 1000. There's a big exception to this rule, that in Act 4, the one that deals with Babylon, the main reader is going to be Martin Worthington. Martin Worthington is a lecturer in Assyriology. He is making himself the leading authority on Mesopotamian civilization. This act, in my judgment, is a lament for a lost civilization as well as a curse on sin. And so we're going to mark this by using some Babylonian imagery, and he and I are going to interpret it as being a lament for the death of a great culture as well as evidence of sin. You're going to hear both medieval and modern music. In the play, the angelic voices will be chanted in plain song by a leading exponent of plain chant singing, Reuben Thomas, a lay clerk in Westminster Cathedral latterly. And in the second of the 2 little entr'actes that we've introduced, he's going to sing 2 pieces of medieval art music, 2 pieces in plain song. The first, very dramatic, about earthquakes, commovisti, and then the second, much more lyrical and beautiful, a Kyrie from a quite late Mass. So they'll be singing him chanting in the play and giving you an entr'acte in plain chant. The other music, though, is modern. Things here, Oliver Vibrance and Ed. Oliver Vibrance has created a prelude based on the Dies Irae sequence, and you'll hear the wonderful effect it makes, and this will be interpreted by Ed on the trumpet. They will repeat that music as a kind of entr'acte after Act 2, I think it is, and during Act 2, Ed will be playing the angelic trumpets in the choir. So I wish you a really delightful but also enriching evening, and à tout à l'heure.